So let's just cut right to the chase today,
Let's do it.
because it is 2026. And looking at the stack of research we have on the table right now.
It's a massive stack.
Right. I mean, we've got everything from Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 to the tactical grit of the MOAT test. And staring at all this, we are looking at a massive contradiction in the market right now.
Oh, absolutely.
I've been calling it the 2026 paradox in my head.
I like that. It really is the defining feature of the economy right now, isn't it?
Yeah, because on one side you have this era of, well, hyper-automation. We've got agentic AI, generative tools. Basically, the technical barrier to building a product has just completely collapsed.
Right, it's zero.
You can wake up with an idea at like 8 a.m. and have a working MVP by lunch. But then, and here's the paradox, you look at the market data, and there is this screaming demand for human authenticity.
It's wild.
It feels like the easier it is to build something, the harder it is to actually connect with anyone.
That is exactly the tension. We've shifted from a world where your competitive moat was, your ability to build.
Which used to take a team of engineers.
Right, months of work. But now we've moved to a world where the only moat left is your ability to validate. Since the AI agents can basically build anything you tell them to, what matters infinitely more than the how.
And the money totally follows that shift. I was looking at the venture capital numbers in our brief before we started.
It's grim.
Yeah. Overall funding is down 20% since 2023. That is a massive contraction for the broader market.
Yeah, and this is the crazy part. Almost $19 billion has poured specifically into AI infrastructure.
Just massive concentration of wealth.
Exactly. So the capital exists, but the days of, winging it with a pitch deck and a dream, those days are totally dead. The standards for a Series A are just incredibly high now.
Which actually brings us to the mission for this deep dive today. We aren't just sitting here summarizing business books.
No, nobody needs that.
Right. We're trying to synthesize a systems thinking approach for you, the listener, specifically for 2026. Because if the barrier to entry is zero, the noise is infinite.
Yeah.
So if you're an entrepreneur right now and you can't just code your way to success anymore, where do you actually start?
You start with what I call the diagnostic imperative, or, to put it bluntly, aggressive validation.
Aggressive validation.
Yes. The stats here are just brutal. 43% of failed ventures collapse due to, quote, lack of market need.
Nearly half. That's just wild to me.
It's a tragedy is what it is.
That means almost half of founders out there are spending years of their lives building solutions for problems that literally do not exist.
And in 2026, that trap is even more dangerous.
Because of the AI.
Exactly. AI can give you these false positives. You can ask an agent to write a business plan or simulate a customer persona, and it will give you this glowing, perfectly formatted report.
Telling you exactly what you want to hear.
Right, but that's hallucinated validation. It's not real. You have to go back to the fundamentals, like the MOAT test.
I have always loved this framework. But let's apply it to the modern context for everyone. The core idea is basically that everyone lies to you, right? Even your mom.
Especially your mom.
Right.
It's called the compliment trap. So if you pitch your idea, let's say you want to build a new AI tool for organizing digital photos.
Okay.
And you ask a potential customer what you think. People are just socially conditioned to be nice. They'll say, oh, that sounds great. I'd definitely use that.
But that data is completely toxic.
Completely.
Because it makes you feel good. You go build the thing, you spend 6 months on it, and then nobody actually buys it.
Correct. So the MOAT test argues that you have to stop talking about your idea entirely. Don't even mention it. You need to focus purely on the customer's life. You are looking for concrete past data.
And not hypothetical future data.
Exactly. Hypotheticals are worthless.
So instead of asking, would you use this app, you would ask something like, when was the last time you looked for a specific photo and couldn't find it?
Spot on. And then you just shut up and listen. If they say, oh yeah, last week I spent an hour scrolling for a picture of my dog, that's a decent start.
Okay, we have a pain point.
Right. But then you have to ask the killer question. What did you do to solve it?
And if they say, I just scrolled until I found it, or I just gave up.
You're dead in the water.
Wow.
Because that's just a minor annoyance. It is not a hair on fire problem. You are looking for the person who says, I was so frustrated I spent an entire weekend manually renaming 500 files. Or I paid $50 for this other software and it didn't even work.
So if they haven't already spent money or serious time trying to hack together a solution on their own, they're definitely not going to buy your solution.
Exactly. And it's interesting because this validation piece feels like the only thing you actually can't automate right now.
Yeah, you can't just have an AI agent do these customer interviews for you.
No, because you miss all the nuance, the tone, the hesitation, the body language when they wince talking about how much they hate their current software.
That's the irony, isn't it? In the age of AI, the highest ROI activity for a founder is having an awkward face-to-face human conversation.
It really is.
Okay, so let's assume you've done the grilling, you've talked to actual humans. You found a problem that people are actively hacking together solutions for. Now we need to talk about the beachhead market.
Yes, crucial step.
Because in the past, you just launch broadly and see who bites. But the sources are saying AI gatekeepers have completely changed that strategy.
Completely changed it. Think about how people actually find products today. They aren't just typing keywords into Google anymore. They're asking their AI assistants.
Like, find me the best CRM for my small business.
Right. And if your product is marketed as kind of for everyone, the AI can't categorize you effectively. You just get lost in the probabilistic noise.
You're invisible to the algorithm.
You are. You need to be the absolute best solution for a tiny, highly specific group, not sales software, but sales software for dental hygienists in the Pacific Northwest.
That's specific.
That's specific. If you dominate that tiny sliver, the algorithms recognize you as the definitive authority. That is your beachhead.
It sounds so counterintuitive to think small to get big, but it actually reminds me a lot of Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 framework. He notoriously hates competition.
He views competition as a complete failure of strategy. If you're opening a restaurant in a city that already has 5,000 other restaurants, you are fighting for scraps.
Margins are basically zero.
Exactly. You want a monopoly. And the only way to get a monopoly as a startup with limited resources is to shrink the target market until you can own 80% of it.
Okay, so we have the validation down. We have our beachhead. Now we need to move to what I think is honestly the hardest part for builders, the architecture, phase 2.
The structural stuff.
Yeah, we need to unpack the technician's myth from the E-myth, because I think AI actually makes this specific trap way stickier.
It really does. So the technician's myth is this fatal assumption that just because you are good at a technical task, coding, writing, baking, you are somehow automatically good at running a business that does that task.
The classic example is the baker, right? They open a bakery and then immediately burn out because they spend all day baking bread and zero time managing cash flow or marketing.
Exactly. And in 2026, the technician is the founder who spends 12 hours a day tweaking AI prompts and optimizing back-end code, but completely ignores the business model.
They're just building a job for themselves.
Right, not a company. And when you treat your business as a job, you eventually hit what the E-myth calls the death spiral.
Management by crisis.
You're doing the fulfillment, you're doing the selling, you're putting out the fires. The solution here, and this is a massive perspective shift, is to view the business itself as your product.
I love that. You aren't building the app. You are building the machine that builds the app.
Exactly. Systems that run the business and people or agents that run the systems.
But hold on a second, because I'm looking at our source material, and this creates a bit of a conflict.
What?
Well, we have the E-myth saying build a system to scale, and 0 to 1 saying build a monopoly. But then we also have the rework philosophy, the whole company-owned movement saying something completely different. They're saying stay small, don't scale, stay profitable. How are we supposed to reconcile those?
That is the million-dollar question for modern founders. I think the synthesis here is that rework argues traditional scaling is often just bloating.
Okay.
In the past, if you wanted to do 10 times the revenue, you needed 10 times the employees, 10 times the office space.
Right, huge overhead.
But that's simply no longer true. The company of one model in 2026 uses agentic AI to decouple your revenue from your headcount.
Oh, I see. So you can have the massive financial impact of a teal monopoly without the crushing bureaucracy of a traditional corporation.
That is the sweet spot. But, and this is a big but, it requires extreme financial rigor. You can't just wing the numbers.
Right. Let's talk metrics. We all know the standard LTV to CAC ratio. Lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. The old rule of thumb is you want a 3 to 1 ratio.
Spend $1 to make 3. Standard MBA textbook stuff.
Right.
But here's the critical nuance for 2026. AI heavily distorts those traditional metrics.
Because of churn.
Exactly. Churn is much faster now. Switching costs are basically zero. AI can migrate a customer's entire data history from one platform to your competitor's platform instantly.
Wow, yeah.
So you simply cannot bank on a customer staying for 3 years just because it's a technical hassle to leave. They will leave tomorrow if a better option appears.
So that old 3-to-1 ratio might actually be dangerous now.
It's highly risky. You probably need to aim for 4-to-1 or even 5-to-1 because your retention window is shorter. If you aren't rigorously tracking your payback period, you might literally bleed out cash before you even realize your churn rate has spiked.
Which means we are fundamentally moving away from that old Silicon Valley mindset of growth at all costs towards sustainability at all costs.
Exactly. Rework calls it constrained growth. Better, not bigger. Planning is guessing, especially right now. I mean, who knows what the search and discovery landscape is going to look like in 6 months?
Nobody knows.
Right. So writing a rigid 50-page business plan is just a liability. You need to be agile enough to pivot when the tech shifts beneath your feet, because it will shift.
Okay, so let's talk about that agility in the context of actually getting customers. Phase 3, the execution engine. Because even if you have the perfect system, you still need traction.
Nothing happens without traction.
And looking at the Bullseye framework, which covers 19 different traction channels, traditional advertising just seems to be dying a very slow, expensive death.
It really is. Between the ad blockers, the strict privacy regulations, and now this phenomenon of AI blindness.
AI blindness.
Yeah, where our brains are just subconsciously filtering out anything that looks like generated marketing copy. Banner ads and generic social media posts are essentially just lighting money on fire today.
So if ads are dead, what is actually working in 2026? The sources really point heavily toward engineering as marketing.
This is a brilliant tactic. Absolutely brilliant. Instead of buying an ad, you build a free, highly valuable technical tool that solves one tiny sliver of your target customer's problem.
Give us a concrete example of that, and not just, a mortgage calculator on a website. Something unexpected.
Okay, let's say you run a boutique cybersecurity firm. You target remote-first companies. Instead of writing another boring blog post about why security matters, which no one reads, you build a Slack permissions auditor.
Okay, what does that do?
It's a simple free tool. A user plugs it in, it scans their company's Slack workspace, and it generates a report telling them exactly which external guests still have access to their private internal channels.
Oh, wow, that is incredibly useful. Every remote company has that problem.
Exactly, and it's totally free. But to get the actual report, they have to give you their work email. So you've provided massive upfront value, you've proven your technical competence, and you've generated a highly qualified lead for $0 in ad spend.
That is engineering as marketing.
That's it.
It builds trust before the sale even happens. And trust really seems to be the ultimate currency of the realm right now.
Which leads perfectly to the second major traction channel working right now, community and micro-influencers. And to be clear, I do not mean lifestyle Instagram models.
Right.
I mean the moderator of a highly specific subreddit or a developer who maintains a really popular open source library.
People with earned authority in a niche.
Exactly. Because of AI fatigue, we just do not trust polished content anymore. We trust curators. If the moderator of the sysadmin subreddit recommends a monitoring tool, that endorsement is worth 10,000 banner ads.
Because it's vetted by a human they respect.
Right. The Bullseye framework basically says you cannot try to be everywhere at once. You test the channels, you find the one that works. Maybe it's that subreddit, maybe it's your free Slack tool, and then you go all in on that one channel.
But there's a massive trap here too, right? The chasm.
The graveyard of startups, yes.
Explain the chasm for the listeners who might be in it right now without realizing it.
The chasm is the dangerous gap between your early adopters, the techies who absolutely love your weird little Slack tool, and the early majority.
The pragmatists.
Right, the pragmatic managers who don't care about cool tech. They just want things to work safely.
And you can't cross that gap just by being cool or having neat features.
No. The early majority needs heavy social proof. They need safety. And this loops right back to our beachhead concept. You cross the chasm by dominating one specific niche so thoroughly that the pragmatic people in that niche feel like it is professionally risky not to use your product.
Because everyone else in their circle is already using it.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got them in the door, we crossed the chasm. Now how do we keep them? This brings us to phase 4, psychology and retention. And I want to tie this back to that human authenticity point we started with.
It's all connected.
Because if I'm looking at the hook model trigger, action, variable reward, investment, it can feel a little bit manipulative if we aren't careful.
It definitely can. It's powerful psychology. But let's look at the variable reward phase of that model. In the old days of Web 2.0, a variable reward was just a red notification badge, a cheap dopamine hit.
Right, the slot machine mechanic.
Exactly. But in 2026, the most potent variable reward you can offer is actually genuine human connection.
Meaning, I don't just want a generic, automated, good job message from the app.
Right. Think about a modern fitness app. An automated pop-up saying, you walked 10,000 steps is boring. We ignore it. But if the reward is a real unpolished voice note from a community mentor saying, hey, I saw you hit your goal today. That's really awesome. That cuts right through the noise. Authenticity is the reward.
That ties so well into the made-to-stick framework. The 6ES acronym: simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. It's the emotional and story parts that AI still really struggles to fake convincingly.
It does. Founders so often try to look quote-unquote professional by stripping away their actual personality.
Using corporate speak.
Right. That is a massive mistake today. In a totally synthetic world, being a messy, genuine human is your competitive advantage. Tell the story of why you built the thing. Show your failures publicly. That is what creates the emotional hook.
But the stickiest part of the hook model is the final step, right? The investment phase. This is where the user actually puts something of themselves into the product.
This is the ultimate retention hack. If I use your software and I spend weeks training it, I customize the dashboard, I teach the AI my specific brand voice, I upload my entire workflow history, I'm investing heavy effort.
And that data becomes your moat.
Precisely. If I leave your platform, I have to retrain a brand new AI somewhere else from scratch. That investment creates incredibly high switching costs, which protects you from that rapid churn we talked about earlier.
Okay, I want to zoom out for a second here as we move toward the end. We've covered a ton of mechanics today: validation, systems, traction channels, psychology, but there is a deeper philosophy underpinning all of this. And the sources bring up good to great and the concept of the flywheel.
The flywheel is the perfect antidote to the overnight success myth. It's the idea that there is no single miracle moment in business. It's just consistently pushing a heavy wheel, turn by grueling turn.
And in the beginning, it's just brutal. You're pushing with all your might, and it barely moves an inch.
It feels impossible, but you keep validating your assumptions, you keep refining the system, you keep engaging that tiny beachhead market, and eventually the momentum just takes over. The business starts to compound on itself.
And that compounding effect really brings us to the final and perhaps most provocative thought in all this research: the concept of the calm business.
Yes. This is where we completely challenge the unicorn or bust narrative that ruins so many founders.
Because for a long time, the only acceptable definition of success was a billion-dollar exit, right? But Rework and Company of One are suggesting something entirely different.
They are suggesting that in a world of absolute chaos and breakneck AI speed, the ultimate luxury isn't a massive valuation. The ultimate luxury is control. A calm business isn't a lazy business. It's a highly profitable business where the systems actually protect the founder's sanity.
It's the fundamental difference between building a machine that frees you and building a job that traps you.
And with the tools we have right now in 2026, the automation, the agentic AI, the global reach, you can build a dominant, incredibly lucrative business that simply does not require 80-hour work weeks.
But you have to intentionally design it that way from day one.
You do. If you chase vanity metrics and blind top-line growth, you will successfully build yourself a very shiny cage. But if you prioritize validation, profit, and robust systems, you build a vehicle for personal freedom.
So let's synthesize this entire deep dive into a battle plan for the listener. If you are listening to this right now and you're ready to make a move, what is the definitive priority list?
Okay. Phase 1 is diagnostic. Do not write a single line of code. Go find 5 actual humans in your target niche and ask them about their past behavior. If they aren't already spending time or money trying to solve the problem, walk away.
Phase 2?
Phase 2 is architectural. Design the business as a product. Use AI to handle the rote operations so you don't become the bottleneck in your own company.
And Phase 3?
Traction. Ignore the broad advertising channels. Build something incredibly useful like engineering as marketing, or embed yourself deeply in a specific community to cross that chasm.
And remember, there are other paths too, We focused heavily on startups today, but acquisition entrepreneurship is huge right now.
Mm.
Buying a boring, traditional business like a plumbing supply company and then layering these modern AI systems on top of it.
The buy then build model, it's brilliant because it skips the validation risk entirely. The cash flow already exists, you are just upgrading the engine.
Exactly. So whether you build from scratch or you buy, the message across all these sources is crystal clear. The tools to build have never been better, but the human fundamentals have never mattered more.
Don't let the AI distract you from the human at the other end of the transaction. That is the paradox, and that is the key to winning right now.
I think that is the absolute perfect place to leave it today. So think about it. Are you building a machine that works for you, or are you building a cage? Something to mull over this week. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.